Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I am a cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court appointed and private, marriage counseling, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Counseling and Therapy Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalek.com. Today, I am very excited to have on our podcast for the last episode of season 2, a very special guest of mine, Dr. Shirag. Just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it up to the guest to properly introduce himself, as no one can do a better job. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit about me. So I'm Dr. Shirag, like you mentioned. Grew up in Los Angeles and, to immigrant parents, and my education and career has taken me in a lot of great directions. And I've, for a long time, been assisting students with getting into top colleges and medical schools. That's a specialty, and been doing it for nearly 2 decades now, and really love helping people on their educational and career journey.
Beautiful. Thank you for your intro. So you're a doctor in psychology, is that correct, sir?
Correct. Yes, I have my PhD in clinical psychology.
Beautiful. So what brought you to get into this field, beside helping people, of course?
Oh, sure. I mean, I just found it fascinating. Growing up, I was pre-med, since I can remember, since my dream of playing in the NBA died, I was like, all right, I got to take my schooling really seriously. And, I have, my parents are immigrants from Lebanon. And so they were always talking about, becoming a doctor or a dentist or an engineer or something like that. And
or lawyer.
or lawyer. That I call it the menu, the immigrant menu. I always gravitated towards medicine and healthcare, partly because I was interested in the sciences and anatomy, but also because my older brother wanted to, be a doctor too. So I was like, that sounds good. I look up to him. And, I was going through high school and college and was on that path and had done very well. But I was getting really interested in mental health, both clinically and research wise. And I grew up with Touret syndrome since around age 8, age 9, when I was diagnosed. And so I was always fascinated with the brain and how it works, and how it sometimes doesn't work the way we hope it does, and how to intervene in those kinds of things and proper diagnosis. So my career took me to clinical psychology, and I studied a lot about diagnostics and how to diagnose properly, and was doing a lot of work in brain imaging and things like that. And over time, I got more and more interested in entrepreneurship. And with entrepreneurship, I was wondering, what is it that I can do? Of course, there's, the private practice route and all that, but I was finding I was helping a lot of students with admissions, and the interest was growing and growing. And I just found, that was my true calling. And it's interesting that a lot of the skills that I studied in school, as far as, validating people and, holding, their concerns and making sure to, motivate them the right way, just really comes up in my day-to-day work. And it's just been an amazing sort of merging of my interests in education and psychology.
Wow, that is fascinating. So for most people who know anything about Tourette syndrome, I'm not sure if like in different movies, they kind of like not poke fun at it, but sometimes you have a quick response of either yelling in the middle of a sentence or kind of reacting of like either screaming or whatever it is. So what's your spectrum of Tourette syndrome, Doc?
Yeah, so Tourette syndrome can look like a bunch of different things. The stereotype is people will curse uncontrollably. That's actually a pretty rare symptom. But it's nice, if I curse, I can say, well, I have Tourette's, I get it. I get a nice built-in excuse. No, but there's a lot of misconception around Tourette syndrome, right? And it's essentially characterized by motor and vocal tics that are repetitive, stereotyped. And, that can be like as simple as a shoulder shrug or a face grimace. But then on the vocal side, it could be, a bit of a hum, like a, or, in more, I guess, severe cases, you can have things like, screaming a word in the middle of a sentence, or when somebody else is speaking, and things like that. So it's actually quite wide. And, tics can be pretty simple, like I said, like a shoulder shrug, or they can be more complex, where you pound your chest and you move your arm out or something like that. And there are patterns of behaviors. And I would say, in adolescence, it tends to sort of increase in severity, from childhood to adolescence. And then for most people, when they become adults, it either, smooths out a little bit and, declines in intensity, and or sometimes becomes non-existent in people. In some cases, it persists and increases, and those are severe cases, but they're quite rare.
Oh, okay. So at 8 years old, what prompted your parents to having to diagnose you for Tourette syndrome? Were they specific signs, like symptoms or anything like that, that they've noticed to be something abnormal?
Yeah, so a lot of facial tics. So I would have, tics like maybe making a face like that, or sticking my tongue out in a certain way. And so it just got to the point where my parents were concerned, and they might, initially they thought it was a bad habit. And they said, it's not a bad habit, I can't stop. It took a while for my parents to come to terms with that. It's not like they believed me, right up front. And it was very tricky. You're talking in the, early 90s, right? It's not, we don't have the same amount of information or acceptance of, mental health or, neurodevelopmental concerns. Right. So when we went to physicians, I probably saw 4 different doctors until, I saw a pediatric neurologist. She's like, oh, you have this within like a minute. Whereas all the other people, it could be this, you're stressed, you have high blood pressure, like weird kinds of things. But then, a specific expert was able to diagnose it, right away. And it was really nice because we had an answer, what is this mysterious thing? But also for me and my comfort level, it was pretty validating, right? So it's like, I'm not making this up. It's not just a bad habit. There's something going on. Now, that didn't mean, you take a pill and it goes away and stuff like that. But it was nice to have an answer, right? To know what you're dealing with. And, I learned more and more about it too, and realized that, well, it doesn't actually, hurt you in any way. It's just, it's going to be this involuntary thing or semi-voluntary thing that I might have with me my whole life. And, probably the biggest consequence is more about your self-concept, right? What do you think about yourself when you have it? Do you think something's wrong with you? Do you think you're less capable? And also, when you're a kid, like people make fun of you, or even as an adult, sometimes, there are stories of my wife and I going to the grocery store and someone says, are you okay? Like you just made a face. And I'm like, oh, I have Tourette syndrome. And then, they'll say, don't cuss at me. Haha, something like that. And, I'm used to it now, and I use it as an opportunity to educate people, but my wife gets pissed off, but so because she didn't grow up around it and all that kind of stuff. So it's something that I've developed more comfort with over time, and I actually think it's been really nice to educate others and inform others. I've recorded YouTube videos on it where we get a bunch of questions about it, and it's really interesting now.
Well, your conversation is very fluid, which is something that is not a symptom of Tourette syndrome. Usually they're interrupted with, like you said, a cursing word or anything of that sort. So that's really interesting on how your symptoms are really mild compared to other spectrum of Tourette syndrome. There was a story, actually, I'm not sure if you ever heard of it, Doc, the girl in Australia who had Tourette syndrome. She was 13 years old. I'm going to give you or send you the information, but that was super severe. And she was cursing and she was hitting other people as well as a reflex, kind of like, extending their arm, but she was hurting someone, whatever it is.
Sure.
And then they use some kind of like neurons or like a kind of like a shock system into the brain to kind of like simmer down those Tourette syndrome attacks. But then after that, there was other complications where they had to remove the electric shock in her brain. But there were, like you said, there were studies about it. And now she's somewhat functional, okay? But compared to what she was before, and it's through growth, it's through like getting older, that her symptom subsided a little bit, but nothing compared to you. You seemed like, if you would have not told me that you had Tourette, I would have not known.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it shows up differently in different people. And even, the vocal tics that you just described of, interrupting mid-sentence or yelling something mid-sentence, that's actually not super common, so I've been in rooms where I've been asked to speak at the Touret Association of America and stuff like that. Even there, where, all the kids have Tourette syndrome, the people who will make a sound like that or interrupt mid-sentence, it's actually quite rare. And so it's one of those things. Well, why did that girl in Australia make the news, or why was there a movie about her? Because it was an extreme, you don't just, you don't make a movie about someone with mild depression,
No,
You make a, in a
that's
movie about someone with severe depression or severe suicidality, right? And so it's always important to remember, why is this person being discussed? Probably because it's an outlier. But yes, in severe cases, that are very treatment resistant,
mhm.
you see that kind of thing where there are essentially they use electricity and mild electric waves to in the brain to stimulate certain areas to impact how much someone is experiencing tics.
You said something interesting that once you were diagnosed, that made you feel a bit validated and made you feel like, okay, now we know what the problem is. But then at the same time, that has impacted your self-esteem as saying that, okay, now there's something wrong with me. How do I fix it or how do I manage it?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different from, another condition. I would imagine, someone who's experiencing depression, if they're having a hard time, getting things done in their life, getting up in them or whatever the case might be, it's not very fun to hear, God, just like get over it, or you need to get more motivated, or just snap out of it. That's not fun to hear if you're someone who's experiencing depression or anxiety. Stop. Why are you worrying about this? It's not a thing. That's not very helpful
Mhm.
when you tell someone with an internalizing disorder, things like that. It's the same thing with Tourette syndrome in the sense that it's like, just stop it. Like, it's a bad habit. What are people going to think of you if you keep it going? It doesn't feel good because you can't stop. Right. And so having a label or a proper diagnosis just allows you to say, look, it's, yeah, sure, something's wrong with me in the sense that there's something actually going on. It's not just a bad habit, but there's also something comforting in saying, oh, there's something here. There are treatment options, there are management. Now I know the prognosis, I know the course of the condition, I know what's likely to happen over time. So you actually have a game plan rather than having a billion question marks. And so for me, it was kind of weird. I mean, my initial thing was relief. Like, see, dad, like there's a doctor who's saying this thing, it's real, and I wasn't making it up. And, that was my initial thing. It was just pretty satisfying to get a diagnosis about this. Now, over time, I understood, it might go up over time and, subside later. But of course, as a kid, during your adolescent years in high school, not a fun time to, have those symptoms increase. So there were certainly days where I was, made fun of and all this kind of stuff. Or if I wanted to ask someone out and if I got turned down, I'd wonder, is it because I have Tourette syndrome and all these kinds of stuff. And, these are questions that you ask yourself when you have Tourette syndrome. But I also realized that there was an opportunity pretty young, because I'm not sure about the exact percentage, but it's non-trivial. It's somewhere between 50 and 100% of people, I think, with Tourette syndrome don't go to college, or don't get a college degree or something like that. And there are studies of people with Tourette syndrome, and there are no differences in intelligence, right? So it's not like people with Tourette syndrome are cognitively less capable than other people,
Okay.
right? And I think, so that got me curious, because it's like, well, what is it then? It's probably their own self-belief or the social ramifications, right? They're tired of being in public places where people are looking at them or making fun of them and things like this. And so I thought, well, I'm still doing well in school. I'm still, I still have friends. I play on the basketball team and do all these kinds of things. And, I can get into a good college and what have you. And so I just saw that as an opportunity of, it's not just for me. If I do well, I think I can inspire other people or educate other people that you too can do X, Y, and Z. So sometimes, I'll hear someone say, well, I have this, it's not the same, you don't know. I'm like, no, I do know. And, you have to recognize that, hey, like, I was dealt these cards, but I decide, what my ceiling is. And so taking ownership of that rather than seeing it as an excuse for not achieving things, I think is a very powerful, message for some people to hear, because we all have to, I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I grew up in this kind of neighborhood. My parents are from this kind of place. I have this condition and all these kinds of things. But at some point you have to decide, which excuses and which, things, which stories in your life are you telling yourself that's guiding your behavior, and how are you going to change that? I grew up with two immigrant parents who came here, I think literally with less than $1,000 in their pocket, and they worked their way up. And, we grew up solidly middle class in a very questionable neighborhood in Los Angeles, and all these kinds of things. And it wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either, right? To figure it out. And so I just want people to recognize what are some of the stories that they're telling themselves that's keeping them from where they want to be, right? And that's very true in life in general, and certainly in in a therapy setting where you practice too, Dr. Dan.
Wow, that's very, very interesting perspective you got there, Doc. I mean, this certainly will let our listener know that despite the challenges and hurdles that you face or that anyone face, you could overcome them. And it should not because you have Tourette or you have anything else that will supposedly hinder your progress. You
Sure.
show the complete opposite, which this in itself, Doc, kudos to you, my friend, honestly.
Thank you.
You have done a lot that a lot of people probably would never even imagine that it was capable. You were able to still have good grades. You were still able to go and do your doctorate degree in clinical psychology, etc. Now, in your practice, do you primarily focus on people who have Tourette because you're more, I would say, inclined to understand their problems, or you cover every kind of illnesses?
Yeah. So current, I don't. We're recording this in December 2021. I'm no longer in clinical practice, right? So when I saw patients, I would specialize mostly in kids, and yeah, it was certainly behavioral conditions like a Tourette syndrome or an ADHD, and I would also see people with anxiety disorders and depression. I have a lot of training in OCD. But my work now focuses entirely on college and medical school admissions, especially medical school admissions. And we do certainly get students who have various mental health conditions and or disabilities and stuff like that, and we have an expertise in helping them tell their stories through their applications.
Okay.
But at the same time, we also work with students all over the board, right? So we work with students who have a 3.9 and GPA and a 99th percentile score on the MCAT who want to get into the best medical schools. We also work with people who have maybe some sort of developmental disability and they're struggling in school and who have accommodations and really want to talk about their story and frame it in a very effective way for medical school admissions committees and everything in between. So I think that my experience going through the admissions process and assisting people and talking about my own Tourette syndrome on the way to getting scholarships and admissions and things like that really has given me the background to understand, okay, what is compelling about someone's story? How do you frame it in the right way? If there are challenges, not only, I get the question a lot, should I talk about this, yes or no? I think that's a bad question most of the time. The better question is, if I were to talk about it, what's the best way to pull it off? What does this say about me? What qualities can I communicate? And getting to know folks at that level, has just been tremendous for our student success.
Wow, interesting. So if let's say from the time that you were diagnosed at 8 years old till now, have your symptoms been or have your tics been similar? Have they gone down? Have they gone up? In any case, I mean, I know, like you said, there's different spectrum of the Tourette syndrome, but in your case, was it linear in terms of the symptoms, or did they go up or down throughout your journey?
Yeah, it was probably linear between, age 8, 9, all the way till, let's call it 16.
Okay.
And so, they would get a little more frequent, a little bit more intense. They never crossed over into severe, I would say they sort of peaked at moderate symptoms. I rarely had vocal tics. And if I did, it was, a simple sound like a, something like that. But then the motor tics, I still have them today, maybe a little shoulder shrug or, something where I flex my wrist or something like that, or make a little grimace. But when I was in adolescence, it would be a little bit more like, a head tilt or, like something like that, a head jerk or something of that nature. So it sort of went up to that point and then it slowly started to subside. So it was a little less in college and less so in adulthood to the point now where people who know me, they say, I don't even notice it anymore. Maybe it's just, the same way they're like, oh, you have curly hair. Oh, you do that thing. And I don't think twice about it unless you point it out. So it's also about developing relationships, right? And people who you trust and are comfortable with. But also, you give it power or don't give it power, right? So if you talk about it a lot or all these kinds of things, I only talk about it if it comes up, if it's appropriate in that context, or if somebody asks me about it. But usually, I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't ask me about it, who wonder and maybe ask someone, hey, have you noticed he does that thing? And I don't even know what happens in the background, but it's sort of, I don't remember much of life without it, right? So it's just part of my daily experience.
Are people with Tourette syndrome more prone to seizures?
Interesting question. So I don't, that's not an expertise of mine, the comorbidity of seizures with Tourette syndrome. There might be, certain areas of the brain that might be co-implicated and perhaps, but it's not something that I have the expertise to answer.
Oh, okay, okay. I was just wondering if yourself you have experienced any seizures in your life due to Tourette syndrome.
Not that I know.
Not that you know. Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, I haven't experienced any seizures that I know, let
As you
alone
know, yeah.
whether they're attributable to Tourette's or not. So for me, no seizures.
Okay, okay, that's good. At least you're staying healthy. Now, do you feel that physical fitness? I mean, I know that you said that you were doing basketball, etc., that you wanted to go to the NBA, but since that didn't happen, did you continue doing any sports or anything like that? And do you feel that the sport in itself allowed you to be able to reduce any of those tics or those symptoms of Tourette?
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting when you're really engaged with something, whether it's playing basketball or video games, your tics go down,
Mhm.
right? And so sometimes people say, "Oh, I just think, it's a habit or whatever because look, my kid stops when they're doing X, Y, and Z." But when you're really focused on something, so with tics, it's interesting. They're described as involuntary. I don't like that word for tics personally. I think they're semi-voluntary. You're doing them. You feel the urge when it comes. Now you do it so often it becomes sort of second nature. But if you said to me, "Don't do anything for 10 seconds," I can do that. I can
Oh,
sit
okay.
here and control that. Now it'll feel like a buildup of that urge. So after the 10 seconds, I'm like, okay, I want to do this to feel
Yeah.
relief. But I can do that, for short bursts. And certainly if I'm really locked in and I'm playing basketball or something like that, then I won't do them. But as far as me and my experience in high school, so yeah, I in high school I ran cross country. I played basketball both at the varsity level and in college I would play more recreationally. Now I don't get to I don't get to play as much basketball. I have a wife and a 3-year-old son and a business and all these different things that keep me busy. But I take at least a 30-minute walk every day. I lift weights about 4 times a week.
Okay.
And otherwise, if I can go on a hike and something like that, I do it. And I think I'm a stereotypical San Diegan in that way. Sometimes people visit from out of town and they say, everyone here is so fit. I'm like, well, it's what you do here. You go outdoors, you do all this stuff. And so it's pretty fun that way. But yeah, I find that it's just, it allows me to be more sharp in general. And also, I know that if I've been eating a little more poorly as of late or exercising a little bit less or sleeping way less, I just don't feel good. I feel a little bit, flabby and slow and those kinds of things. And so it's always nice for me to stay sharp.
That's beautiful. Now, you said that you stopped your practice of clinical psychology. How long have you been in it? And do you feel that the the new the new business that you have for helping medical student to get into college, do you feel that that was a easier transition to from clinical psychology to what you're doing now, or why did you stop pursuing that sector? I would say that business.
Yeah. So, after graduating from my PhD program, I was seeing patients on the side, and the work that I was primarily doing was building psychological tests. So my expertise is in, diagnostics and developing tests to diagnose people and all this kind of stuff. And actually, even before I graduated from my PhD program, I was helping people with the admissions process. Some earlier on, it was, friends and cousins and a cousin's friend and all these kinds of things. And it was purely word of mouth. But it was towards, the end of grad school where, this business was formed in the way that it exists today. So I was doing it on the side. So it wasn't an abrupt thing where I was seeing patients or doing psychology work. It stopped. And then the next day I started working on admissions. I've been working on admissions for a long, long time.
Okay.
And it just, like I said, my level of interest was sort of growing in not only admissions, but also in entrepreneurship and helping people in that way and helping them become doctors because it's insanely difficult in our country to become a physician.
Yes.
And, our students were demonstrating an exceptional track record. So I said, well, there's something here. We're doing a good job. People are finding value. They're referring. I started writing about it online. There were random people coming to us now. So it was a pretty smooth transition from that standpoint, right? From a purely business standpoint, it wasn't abrupt and all those kinds of startup issues. Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't an anxiety inducing experience, right? I'm sure a lot of people who, have worked in a job with a salary and all these things, when they decide that, okay, I'm actually going to go into my own thing, it's pretty scary experience. Is it going to work? Was it a fluke? What if, I'm going to give up my benefits through my company and all this kind of stuff. We have a market, all the stuff that people worry about. And that was very real for me. We had a son, I have a family, we have rent and all these kinds of things. And so that was a tough break to make, sort of just, mentally, right, and emotionally. But I realized that when I did it, there was a really nice benefit of giving your full self to it, right? Because I think, so starting something on the side is really nice because you can test the water, see if you really like it before going, all in. But at the same time, are you giving it your all, right? Yeah. And so at some point you got to make a decision, assuming your careers, the work you're doing on an employment basis is really fulfilling, but also this sort of side work you're doing or the side business you have, that's also really fulfilling. At some point, you're probably going to have to make a decision if you want to be as good as you can be. And you have to be fair to yourself and the two things that you're pursuing, right? You have to give yourself fully, or otherwise you're going to lower your ceiling in both of them. So for me, it just came to that realization point, and I want to be, at home more and have a more flexible schedule for my family, and also be able to build this, organization to serve more and more people. And so that's when I made the decision to, go into it full time.
Beautiful. Now, you've been in it for, like you said, 2 years, around 1 or 2 years?
No, full time for years now, but been doing this work for over 15 years, for the better part of 2 decades, helping people with the admissions process.
Okay. And now for the admission process part, so you basically help the student write their essay. You help them formulate the plan on which university to go and apply to based on their grades, or what is your role on how to take a student from graduating college to applying for medical school?
Sure. I mean, we start way earlier than that even. So we have students who are between college and high school and college, who come to us even as early as the summer before freshman year of college. And
oh, wow, okay.
We develop, a 4-year course plan, what courses to take, what to major in, what extracurriculars to do, how to get enough physician shadowing and patient exposure experiences, and what research to do, helping them to secure those things, assisting them in finding and securing those opportunities. And then over time, we also help them with MCAT prep. So people who aren't familiar with the MCAT, it's like the ACT or the SAT, but for medical school admissions.
Or GMAT.
The same way. Yeah, the GMAT for business school. Yeah, so that's the MCAT. It's for medical school. So we do tutoring with that on a comprehensive basis. And then when the application comes around, this is when we get into some of the areas that you just brought up about how do you decide which schools to apply to, based not only on your stats, so your GPA and your test scores, but also your fit with different programs, what they offer, and what you've demonstrated through your resume. Mm-hmm. Also, it's pretty complicated as far as what state of residence you're applying from, because there are some schools that will be more or less okay with people from your state. If you're applying to an in-state public school, you're going to have higher odds and things like this. So it gets pretty complicated very quickly. But in addition to that, yes, we assist with, brainstorming, outlining, and editing all essays. So choosing the right topic, building the right outline, editing the essays however many times we need to make sure that it's in final form. We provide interview coaching. We provide, update letters. So if someone's on a wait list, how to get off the wait list. So it's a very comprehensive service, from A to Z with the med school admissions process.
And how long does it usually take? You said that you take them from when they're about to finish high school, like grade 11 in high school. This process, like a 2, 3, 4-year program that you allow them to do, or until they are accepted?
Yeah, so we do help students for 4 years, up to 4 years, right? So someone can come to me right before their applications, a couple of months before it's due, and that's more of a 1-year relationship because you're guiding them through the whole application cycle. But other people who come at the beginning of college, it's a 4-year relationship. So we really get to know these people. We get to know families. I've sent cards to families. I've received gifts from families. When they get in, I sometimes I'm able to, call parents and personally congratulate. And it's kind of weird. I've been called, someone's uncle, almost like an honorary uncle, in different languages. And it's just such a treat. It's a very difficult process.
Mm.
It's very anxiety inducing. So with college in our country, we're fortunate to live in a country where there are so many colleges. Chances are you can get into one if you want. Whereas with medical school, it's not like that. It's if you will get in somewhere, not where you will get in. And so there are a lot of hopes and dreams on the line, right? Parents hoping that their kid does a certain job, these students wanting to become a physician. And some of these people without our support would have not gotten in, or some people who got in would have not gotten into the caliber of school they got into with our support. So I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility through this whole process, and it's a treat to do it.
So, for our listeners, how, if someone or if any parents that are listening to this podcast, they want to be able to get in touch with you, Dr. Shirag, where can they go, and which kind of like social media platform do you use to promote your services?
Yeah, sure. So I have a bit of a tricky last name, not very different from you, doctor.
Okay.
I'm sure you'll link to it in the show notes. But our website, shemmassianconsulting.com, or just type Shemmassian in Google, SHEMMASSIAN. And there are contact forms where you can clearly get in touch with us. We also have a very active YouTube channel where we publish something new every week, whether it's an MCAT passage walkthrough or something related to medical school admissions or what have you. And you can write in the comments there. But contact at shemmassianconsulting.com is our email address. Please reach out there. Happy to assist with anything you need admissions related.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really do appreciate you, Doctor, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. Thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you have all enjoyed today's episode. I'm very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 3 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are a few concluding words of wisdom. The will to win, the desire to succeed, the urge to reach your full potential, these are the keys that will unlock the door of personal excellence. Oh, and one more thing to remember. Success doesn't happen overnight. It's when every day you get a little better than the day before. It will all add up, and before you know it, you will be the next one that everyone will hear about. No need to waste your energy in trying to tell others about how you will succeed. Let your actions show it. Trust me, they will learn quickly about who you are. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.